Hey everyone, DJ Eshelman here. Wanted to say a quick thank you to everyone who has bought one of these. It is awesome to see so many people grabbing this, get excited about it. And hey, I want to see your picture. I want to see you up on social media with your smiling face next to this book, just like this. Yeah, I want to see it. The more the merrier. So I wanted to take a minute for those of you who might not know what this book is about. If it's not obvious what Be A Citrix Hero means, it means that these are strategies that are specifically put in place to take you from being someone who is maybe just administering Citrix and maybe just at a basic level to the point where you're making seemingly little decisions and changes that make you into a hero in the eyes of the ones you're serving, which is important, actually, not just because we're living in a time where we're depending on Citrix more than ever, but also for you as a person. It's good to have these wins. And so what I wanted to do is put together specific recommendations that I make quite often when I'm doing consulting arrangements. In fact, I would say the first few chapters of this are either based on recommendations that I've been making for years or based on just trying to give people a deeper understanding of some key technologies and how they work. So the first things we'll talk about is, very first thing is chapter 1, Windows OS tuning, which is actually one of the most important things you can do. It's actually also one of the easiest things to do, thanks to Martin and his team putting together the optimizer, which is it's just awesome. I mean, it does a lot of what we talk about here. It used to be a big, long process. Now it's just really easy. A couple of clicks and you're done. Optimizing the operating system is really important for work from home. And the reason why is because we're doing a lot more with the same amount of stuff we had before. In other words, it's not like we have people installing new servers and putting those suddenly in place that we're able to spin up to. Some people in the cloud are doing a little bit, but even still, unoptimized operating system hurts in the cloud even more than in your own data center. So it's actually really important to be able to fully optimize that so that each individual session is using less resources than the other ones. It's pretty techie stuff, obviously, but this is a techie book, right? So that's what you're doing in chapter 1. You're learning how to best optimize the operating system. Now, a quick note about that. I'm not saying that everything is perfect, and I'm not saying that everything is exactly the way it should be. I'm saying these are easy tips, easy things you can do and just make sure are done because they're the ones that have been proven over time to work. So that's why we're doing it. In the second one, we talk about the Netscaler itself, and this is much more security related around the gateway. And I said Netscaler, I should say Citrix ADC. It'll be 5 years and I'll probably still be saying Netscaler. So sorry, Citrix, just the way it is. I'm old school. But anyway, so you can see here, actually another thing I should point out is in each chapter, I give the kind of importance, the amount of user impact, the security impact, and the level of difficulty that I judge these individual chapters and recommendations to be. And so that's how these are organized. So you can quickly see, okay, how much impact does this have and how much effort would it take to do these things? And so you can kind of get a gauge of which ones you want to tackle first. But the Netscaler, the Citrix ADC chapter largely deals with just some security things and some things that are just really good to have that don't come out of the box this way. The Netscaler is made kind of out of the box with its VPX or physical appliance to have a lot of things that are built on compatibility so that you can actually configure the device. Citrix is always assuming that you're going in after the fact and securing that device and making sure it's optimized for whatever you're using it for, be it load balancing or gateway or any of the other things that a Netscaler that a Citrix ADC can do. So that's what this chapter is all about, is primarily focused around the gateway functionality and how to properly optimize and secure that so that you can more support a safe work from home. Now, chapter 3 is actually one of my favorites because we're talking about workload placement. In other words, how many VMs should you have on a physical server? How should those be arranged? What kind of processor specifications should we use? We're still using a lot of server OS for delivering desktops and applications. Rightfully so. It's a good way to go with that. So this chapter talks a lot about how to optimize that. We also talk a little bit about some of the things you can do in the hardware itself to make sure that it's performing at the highest level. So that's what that's all about. So we also talk about Nick's famous rule of 5 and 10, which in my research still holds true. It still holds up. It still works. And so even though that is from guidance that, a bunch of us in consulting put together over years of practice, the funny thing is it's held up. As much as the processors have moved forward and some things move back with some of the vulnerabilities we've had to deal with, but also the fact that workloads are getting more complex and all that kind of stuff, the rule still holds true. And so I explain more about that and why it's important to you in chapter 3. Now, chapter 4 is a lot of fun. This is actually came out of a lesson that I did with the Citrix Hero program, which was a paid program that people were part of and got lessons from me directly. And so this chapter actually came from another one of those lessons that was really popular and well received, because we're talking about two key things here. Provisioning services and how to best tune that, which has been a push button of mine for almost a decade now. But also we talk about how to properly size things like memory in your virtual machines and in the server themselves to take advantage of that technology, because it really is still continues to be a game-changing technology, and so it's really important. But I also go into machine creation services and how you can tune some of those settings to get very good results. In fact, we actually have some data pulled from actual customers here that demonstrated some ways that by adjusting the amount of RAM that I had in a system, I was able to get the system IOPS down to almost 0, and user experience went way through the roof just by doing simple little things like that. And so again, these are the quick, easy wins. So I've done the work, I've done the research, so you don't have to, sort of thing. So that's great. But we also talk a lot about the actual target devices or the endpoints for machine creation services and how those can be fine-tuned themselves to have the right amount of resources so that your users have the best experience possible. So we get into chapter 5, which is another area where I think as end user computing specialists and Citrix heroes, that sort of thing, we often forget how important Active Directory is. Without a high-performing Active Directory, how good are you going to be? This is the glue that holds everything together. And so it's really important to realize that there's a lot you can do with it, but there's also a lot of things that are really key as far as how you have your policies structured. You can actually literally have the same policies that you apply structured in different ways and have dramatically different results. And so proper use and tuning of Active Directory and group policies is really important. And so we talk more about that. We're pulling from a lot of people's different research here. So it's not just me doing this. There's so many of us that have been writing so much helpful content. And so there's a lot of these links that are in the book that I want you to go see as well, and not just take the face value. I also give kind of my preferred infrastructure guidance, how I usually lay out my OUs and why I do them that way. And so it explains some of the methodology there. And so moving along, we talk about as I get into chapter 6, another fun chapter, one I almost didn't put in the book, but I decided to do it anyway, because I think that Workspace Environment Manager, which is something Citrix has had for several years now, that not anywhere near enough people are actually utilizing. The point with Workspace Environment Manager is that you can do some really simple things with it that have a dramatic impact. A lot of the other more complicated policy things like that, yeah, that's all great and dandy and all that, but a lot of that doesn't really have an impact on user performance as much as just some of the basic things that are almost out of the box. Just a couple check marks, quick install, and you're done. And it really does make a huge impact. I mean, this has actually been one of the, as far as impacts to user experience, the most night and day has been the times I've implemented Workspace Environment Manager or WEM and the times I haven't. So there's that night and day difference that usually comes about with just that simple change. And so I highly recommend it as something to look into. And so what I give in this chapter is not a full rundown of everything that WEM can do. I'm just giving you just a couple of quick wins to get. And once you get those in place and fine tune them a little bit, then maybe you can move on. But that's the most important thing to get. And then another thing that I really debated, and I call this a bonus chapter because it's it's really not a guidance as far as the technology goes, but it is a lot of guidance on how to win as a technology professional. And that is talking about change management. And specifically, I go into a little bit of my methodology and how it works, and how without a good methodology, it doesn't work. I know we're in a lot of environments these days where it's kind of the Wild West out there. And for those of you that aren't in America, the Wild West refers to a time where there was a lot of lawlessness, and there was just a whole expanse of a country that people were very sparsely populated in. And you pretty much had to get a gun and defend yourself, kind of a thing, because other people had guns and they were coming after you, kind of thing. It was just like that kind of lawlessness. That's kind of what it feels like sometimes in IT, when everybody has their own ideas and agendas, and people aren't really holding it all together with a specific plan of action. That's been a lot better in the last few years, fortunately. But now, as we pivot to the cloud and development cycles are happening more rapidly, what I'm finding out there as I travel to consulting engagements and things like that is that a lot of people have kind of skewed viewpoints on how to make it all work together, and they tend to not work well with each other. And so my philosophy is to keep it as simple as you can. My core methodology has 4 steps, and just 4 steps, because I want everybody to understand it fully. And I didn't want to go into that so much on this book, because there's another book that's coming out in probably a month or 2 months, something like that, that will talk about this in detail, and will go into the non-technical soft skills and communication skills and organizational skills, all those kind of things that are necessary in this. But it goes into that methodology in much more detail. But what I do in here is I give you a preview of the methodology that I use and recommend and have consulted with for several years in some form or another. This is what works. And so I wanted to give you a preview of this and give you some tools. So this is not specific to being a Citrix hero. This is more of being a IT hero in general. Actually, the truth be told, you can use this methodology in a lot more than just information technology, by the way, but that's just something I've observed. I've seen it work well in sales, for example, and things like that. So more to come on that, but I basically lay out some things that are specific to IT and change management, and kind of explain why there's a level of risk that you're taking with each iteration of a change, and the amount of exposure to users for each of those risk levels should be less and less, or less risk, more users, that sort of thing. So that is what that chapter is all about. I also am including in the appendix some other things to note about that, as far as some things you can do to just general strategies on surviving in IT. I thought they were just kind of fun to put in there. So there's a bunch of various things that I just kind of slapped in there as fun. We're talking about better planning, some overall philosophy of how you should approach work in general, working as a team, that sort of thing. These are all in here. So I'm really excited that I got to do this and got to put this out there. And I'm really excited to see so many of you get this book and learn from it. And I'm really been loving all the messages that I've been getting from people about how this has really impacted them and has changed their perspectives on things, not just in the technology world, but just as a person, which that means a ton to me. That's more than I could have ever imagined, to have that level of impact. So how could I not encourage you to go get this? So go get Be A Citrix Hero. It's on Amazon. You can find links to it on my website. Oh, by the way, I know that not every place is getting Amazon shipments right now. We are working on that. We are working with some additional distribution outside of Amazon, or working in conjunction with Amazon, so that these can be actually shipped to some other places. There's some that I know about for sure. I know New Zealand is an issue, which really means I probably just need to pack up a bunch of these and take a trip. But that's probably pretty expensive. So I'm working on something that might be getting you to sooner. So there's some other areas. If you don't have coverage in your area, if you go to Amazon and you can't get this book, email me. I want to know, so that we can make sure that that's included in our expanded distribution plan. So thanks for listening, and hope to see you out there. Go get the book. Cheers.